Hey, I'm looking at YouTube and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. In today's video, football's back. It's so back. I've been waiting for so long. We are going to do my predictions for League One, League Two, that one weird FA Cup, that one weird AFL Cup game that's in midweek, and also a few games in the extra preliminary round of the FA Cup. Because I don't want this video to go on for absolutely hours, and I have not yet had my tea, I am not going to go through all 200, whatever there is, extra preliminary round games. As you can tell by the thumbnail, there's 700 odd teams which are entering the FA Cup this year. Not really going to be able to get through them all in a video without completely losing my voice. So I'm going to go and choose a selection of ones that I find interesting. But that's for the second half of the video. In the first half of the video, we'll be going over the Football League ones. I'm only starting tonight in less than a minute's time in Luton Town versus AFC Wimbledon. Luton Town looking to make an instant return back to the Championship and return to the Premier League maybe eventually. AFC Wimbledon are looking to cement themselves back at League One level, having been promoted via the playoffs in League Two last season. It's always a weird one predicting the opening game of the season because you don't have a lot to go on. So I'm going to go for this one, a 2-2 draw. I think a bit of that good momentum from Wimbledon may continue into the start of this season, and there's a little bit of negativity that Luton had from their previous campaign. On to Cardiff City versus Peterborough United. If you watched my prediction video over earlier on today, and if you've not, please do go and consider so. I thought Cardiff would be mid-table, and I thought Peterborough would be relegated. And where else would I start by saying that Cardiff, on paper, are going to absolutely ace this game? I think they're a team which are streaks above, and I'm going to have to go with a 4-0 win for the Bluebirds here. I just don't see it with Peterborough this season. Blackpool versus Stevenage. Yeah, I mean, I don't rate Steve Bruce that highly. I don't think that Stevenage are going to do that well either this season. I think this is going to be a very dull, boring game, a 0-0 draw. Unfortunately for fans of either club. Bradford City versus Wycombe Wanderers. Wycombe with that great title challenge last season just to fade away. But obviously Bradford with that great promotion. So welcome to League One, Bradford. I think this is going to be a closer game than I think a lot of people may initially think coming into it, with a newly promoted League Two side and a team who did really well in League One last season. I think it is going to go in favour of Wycombe, but I'm only going to go by 1-0. I just have a sneaky suspicion that Bradford are not going to roll over this early on. Burton Albion versus Mansfield Town. It's the first game of the season, we've already got a huge game in terms of Nigel Clough playing up against his former side, Burton Albion, a side, of course, he'll have much love and affinity towards. And obviously, Burton will want to prove their former manager that they have well and truly gone past him. And so I think it's going to be one of them ones which neither side will want to lose this one, and I think I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here. It's at the Pirelli, a nice early point at this stage of the season for Burton. It does the Brewers a lot of help. Got a little sympathy with Burton, obviously, being from Derby. It's just down the A38, so they've always been a little brother which you sort of support as a second team, you know. Doncaster Rovers versus Exeter. Now, I did rate Doncaster quite highly, but I do think this and Exeter quite lowly. But first game of the season, a lot can happen. I'm going to go with a 3-1 win to Exeter. But I would be happy if I'm proven wrong with this one, because that would more indicate that my League One predictions overall are going to plan. Huddersfield Town versus Leyton Orient. Both of these teams were well within a playoff hunt last season, and Leyton Orient actually managed to get there, so to speak. I think Leyton Orient will grab all 3 points in this one, fairly comfortably win this one 4-1, because they still have a good squad. I just think that as the transfer window goes by, a few players start getting sold. You never know. Lincoln City versus Reading. Yes, the Imps, my dark horses again for this season, or one of. And I think up against Reading are one of them teams that looked last season like they could be knocking on the door. Think maybe again this year, but I think a nice early start for Lincoln here. 2-0 to the Imps at Sincil Bank. Plymouth Argyle versus Barnsley. I think both of these teams are going under a bit of a transitional period. I think it's fair to say it's Conor Hurahan's first game as a manager. Plymouth having to adjust back to League One football. I think we know that Home Park can be a bit of a fortress, and for that reason, I think I'm going to go with a 1-0 win to Plymouth Argyle. Rotherham United versus Port Vale. Both of these sides are coming into this game with probably different expectations. I think Port Vale will be content to stay up. I think Rotherham will want to do better than last season and at least be in a playoff hunt, but I don't think it'll be that easy. I think a 1-0 draw here at the New York Stadium. Wigan Athletic versus Northampton Town. If you watch my prediction video, I thought this might be a relegation 6-pointer, so it's very early doors, so to speak. I think Northampton are going to be truly dreadful this season, and for that reason, and also home advantage, Wigan to win this one 2-1. On to League Two, we've got Accrington Stanley versus Gillingham. Both of these sides last season probably had relatively underwhelming seasons, relatively speaking. Gillingham now got Gareth Ainsworth at the wheel. It'll be an interesting one. I think at the Wham Stadium, this might end a goal apiece. Barnet are back in the Football League after quite a while now, it feels. And they're at home for their opening game in the Football League, and they're up against Fleetwood. I think Fleetwood will desperately want to improve from last season's mediocrity. And for that reason, I am going to back Fleetwood to win this one 2-0. But I think once Barnet do manage to adjust to this level, they could be quite some force. Bristol Rovers versus Harrogate Town. I don't rate Harrogate highly to be able to be on the upper end of this table anyway. I think they're going to be in a relegation battle. I think Bristol Rovers, having come down last season, they've previously been promoted relatively recently from League Two. I think they're just going to know what we're going to be doing here. 3-0 to Rovers. Cambridge United versus Cheltenham Town. Both of these teams that within relatively recent history have been relegated from League One, and both of them are probably hoping for a return someday, but I'm not entirely convinced either necessarily will do. I think Cheltenham will win this one, but it won't be pretty. It'll be a 1-0 win for the Robins. Chesterfield, good old Chesterfield. They are hosting Barrow. I have predicted Chesterfield to win the title because I think they are fundamentally the best team in League Two at the moment, actually. And I'm going to back them to win this one. It's not going to be pretty because Barrow aren't a pretty side in any way, shape or form. A 1-0 win for the Spireites. Getting 3 points on the board is all that matters at this stage. Colchester United versus Tranmere Rovers. Two clubs, I think, which are going in different directions. Tranmere Rovers at the moment seem to have been on the regression. Colchester seem to be on the progression. And it's also at Colchester's ground. I think you're going to have to back Colchester to win this one, and I well and truly am. We're going to win 3-0. Grimsby Town versus Crawley Town. Crawley coming back to League Two instantaneously. Not much of a surprise in that one. But they've got Scott Lindsay back in charge. So that could change a lot. Grimsby were in a playoff hunt last season, which I think surprised a fair few people, but I've predicted them to go one step further. I don't think it will start initially. I think it will be a nice competitive game. 3-2 to Crawley. MK Dons versus Oldham Athletic. The new regime under Paul Warne begins this weekend in the league at home, the Stadium MK versus Oldham Athletic, who have returned to the Football League. How they will adjust is interesting to see. They've spent a fair few years now in the National League, and I think they may lose this one. 2-1 to MK Dons, a good start for Warne's men. Newport County versus Notts County, the battle of the counties, so to speak. I put in my prediction video, I said that Nelson Jardim was the issue that was holding Newport back, and I also thought that Notts County made a very stupid decision parting company with their manager last season, at the end of last season, Stuart Maynard, as I thought that Notts County would actually have been able to progress under him and go one stage further. I do think you've still got a lot of that core side. I don't think they've sold Chatter just yet, which may be a little bit of a saving grace in terms of that, because they have lost McGoldrick. I think they will win this one by 2-0, but the longer this rumblings with Chatter rolls on, the harder it will be. Salford City are hosting Crewe Alexandra. I think this one could be interesting because I think both probably have expectations of a playoff finish. I don't think either will necessarily finish there. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in this game here. Shrewsbury Town yet to have found an owner, and they have now dropped down to League Two. And they're up against Bromley, who we saw last season really knew how to get a result, actually. And I'm going to go with a 0-0 draw here. I just have a feeling that Bromley will do well this season, and Shrewsbury not so much. Walsall are hosting Swindon Town. Walsall had such a bad end to last season, but you do worry if that is going to continue into this season, and I think it might, because I think Swindon will be vastly improved this year, or were vastly improved last year, rather, overperforming expectations, and whether they can replicate that this season, I do not yet know, but I think the Robins may win this one by 1-0. Stockport County are hosting Bolton Wanderers in a bit of a Greater Manchester derby here, both opposite sides of Manchester, and neither really want to be considered anything to do with the Mancunian group. But in other words, it's also two teams which probably have an eye on a playoff this season. I think at Edgeley Park, I think Stockport will absolutely dominate this. I'm not rating Bolton that highly this season. 5-0 to Stockport County, which may come as a bit of a shock, but maybe that's the urgency and tempo which Stockport will provide. In terms of as an EFL Cup game in the middle of a week, of Accrington Stanley versus Oldham Athletic in a preliminary round, because of all the vast array of teams which have qualified for European qualification in the Premier League, meaning there's an earlier stage here. It's at the WAM Stadium. It's a bit hard to tell what teams are necessarily going to be put out here. I'm going to have to back Accrington Stanley for home advantage, a 3-2 win here. And there is actually some Thursday night football this upcoming week in League Two, as Cardiff City travel to Vale Park, home of the mighty Valiants. And it's one of them ones when I think Cardiff will start well this season. I just think a bit of weariness and a bit of a fatigue may start approaching the team towards the end as injuries start getting picked up and stuff. A 3-2 win here for Cardiff. Right, on to some of the FA Cup games. I'll start off by picking out Pickering Town. See what I did there. Hosting Penrith. It's a team from North Yorkshire hosting a team from Cumbria. both of these teams are probably mid-table, and actually in a few years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if Pickering somehow translates into the Northern League. I'm going to back Penrith in this one, a 3-0 win. You got Bootle versus 1874 Northwich. Now, a little bit of a history about 1874 Northwich. You know, they were formed in 2012 as a sort of potential Phoenix club for Northwich Victoria, which is a very historic team. And then you've got Bootle, which were formed in the 1950s as a Phoenix club somewhat of the original Bootle. Now, why do I mention both of these ones? Well, both of them at various points in history in the early days of the Football League were in the second division. So this could have been a second division tie at one point. Alas, it is not. And Bootle are actually in the Northern Premier League, Division 1 West. 1874 Northwich are equally, I don't know if they're still at that level, but they were recently at that level to say that they got relegated. No, they were in the Midland League. They got relegated in not that long ago. I think it was 2023-24. They were relegated from the Northern Premier League themselves to the Midland League, but did finish well last season. I'm going to have to back Bootle with this one, the higher rated team. 5-1 to Bootle. Let's see which one we can move on to next. Let's go with Guernsey versus Bedfont Sports. Why have I picked this one out? Well, partly because it's an earlier kickoff on the Saturday, and partly because I think Guernsey potentially could cause an upset. Guernsey being the home side, and they got relegated from the Isthmian League last season, but have been a team which have consistently been performing on a great level in the Isthmian League recently and getting a great deal of fans through the doors. Bedfont Sports are a team which got promoted from the Combined Counties League in the playoffs last season and so in the Isthmian League. So they have swapped places. So it would now be an upset, so to speak, for Guernsey to win. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw at the home one, but I do think that Bedfont Sports will win the replay because the ascendancy is currently with that club. But yeah, I think Guernsey do have a chance to pull an upset off. I'll pick out Bishop Auckland versus Wickham because absolutely fascinating team, Bishop Auckland. They're the record holders of winning the FA Amateur Cup. They are a team which are well established within non-league, and they're a side that during the aftermath of the Munich air disaster back in the 1950s, Manchester United lost in a tragic accident in an air crash a load of their first teamers. And so Bishop Auckland decided to give half of their team, or more than half their team, over to Manchester United, and were the only club to actually help out in that way. And so that there will be forever a link between the two. So yeah, huge team, Bishop Auckland. They regularly get around about 400 at home, which is quite a lot for a side in Tier 9. But we know the Northern League is strong. I think home advantage here, winning on against a Wickham side. I think they're going to win this one at 3-2. Blythe Town versus Hordern Community, I think, is also worth picking out because it's the first time that Hordern Community Welfare, to give its full name, are going to be in the FA Cup for quite some time now, because this is a reformed club. It used to be known as Hordern Athletic originally, and they were reformed in 2017 after being evicted from their home ground. So, and actually in a complicated situation, they became a reserve team to Darlington. And so it's a completely new team, so to speak, but the original team actually lost to Darlington in their best FA Cup, in a first round FA Cup game in 1925-26, losing 3-2 to a second division Darlington side. But they've had their successes in the FA Cup before, narrow defeats to Newport County, losing 3-2 at home, which was their best run when they reached the second round of the FA Cup. 2-1 against Southport, 2-1 against Accrington Stanley, 1-0 against Wrexham, 1-0 against Scunthorpe United, and 1-0 against Blackpool. So it's one of them teams that have regularly in the 1950s, and their last one came in 1980, won against Blackpool, of them ones I listed. A team which has regularly had history in terms of Hordern having history in it. So, and they got promoted from the Northern League Division 2 last season. Blythe Town are a very different team in the sense because they're on the definite up, having been promoted to the Northern Premier League Division 1 East last season, having won the Northern League Division 1 playoffs last season. But they first entered the FA Vase in 2021-22. They were only in the FA Cup for the first time not last season. That wasn't their first time, rather, but they were in 2023-24. They earned promotion to Division 1, and they were only ever in the FA Cup before last season once, I believe, and that was in 2018-19, where they reached the preliminary round. But actually, they are a team which have recently reached the Northern Senior Cup semi-finals. It's final. They won the finals, rather. I think it was, or they reached the final. I definitely saw them at the final of the Northumberland Senior Cup at St James's Park. I think they lost against Newcastle United under 21s. But they're a team in Blythe from the ascendancy compared to Blythe Spartans going the other way. So this could be a really interesting game. I'm going to go with they're both in the ascendancy, but I am going to go with a slightly higher ranked team in Blythe Town. 2-1 to Blythe Town, who I've also seen both of these teams. One at home. I've been to Blythe Town's home ground, and I've also seen Hordern away at Jarrah. We'll go with a slightly random one of West Allotment Celtic versus Northallerton Town, because I think this could be quite a high-scoring game. One of the first games I saw as non-league society president when I was in the Newcastle University, which I've since graduated from, was seeing West Allotment Celtic in the FA Vase, where they were completely rampant and won something like 10-1 against an AFC Blackpool. But they're up against a Northallerton side that is, I think, can do quite well, to be honest. They've reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup twice, Northallerton in 1992-93 and 1993-94. But obviously not had much success since then in the Cup. I just think Northallerton will dominate this one. 4-1 to Northallerton Town. Let's move on to Easington Colliery versus Borough Rangers, because this is the Easington Colliery got promoted last season from not promoted last season, the season before last, rather, in the playoffs, and actually defeating Newcastle Blue Star, which many had tipped to be promoted, and they actually reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1955-56, where a record attendance 4,500 saw them bow out in the Cup against Tranmere Rovers. So they are certainly a team which has a bit of a heritage, but not very recent, mind you. They've mainly recently been in even the county leagues in Northern Alliance. But they're up against Borough Rangers, which have spent almost their entire history of having been formed in 2003 in the Teesside League and then the North Riding League until 2022, where they were admitted to the Northern League Division 2, and then they achieved immediate promotion in that season and have since been in the Northern League Division 1. And to be fair, they haven't been great at the FA Cup as of late in any of their recent ones. The best one was to the preliminary round. But I think they can match that this season. I think Borough Rangers will win this one 2-1. I'll bring up Marske United versus Carlisle City because I'm sure some of you will remember the awful situation which happened with Marske, where financial problems constrained the club. They basically released everybody. They went and withdrew from the Northern Premier League and ended up having to enter the Northern League and start all over again. And I was part of a crowdfunding thing. I paid a bit of my money towards trying to save the club, which did manage to helpfully. They did survive just playing at a lower level. They're up against Carlisle City, which I have seen both of these teams play before, both as away teams. I saw Carlisle City travelling to Newcastle Blue Star in midweek. And they, to be fair, considering how far it is from a midweeker, there were still 4 or 5 fans which made the committed journey. So shout out to them. And Marske were also quite heavily supported away as well. I'm going to back Marske to win this one 1-0. On to North Shields versus Newcastle Blue Star. I'll pick this one out. I'm picking these ones out mainly because a few of the teams I've been to. I'm planning on going to the Newcastle Benfield one, by the way, tomorrow. So I don't necessarily want to predict that one and then end up potentially putting my foot in it. So I'm going to go with North Shields versus Newcastle Blue Star instead. The reason I say this, you can see on the Shorts channel, or the Shorts bit of the channel, that there's 2 of the best atmospheres I've been to in non-league. Both have brought pyro before. I absolutely died, I think, last time I was in a crowd with North Shields and got absolutely pyro to death. Both have got some great fans, and it's going to be a really exciting one purely on the basis of that. Newcastle Blue Star and North Shields have both at some point in their life been in the Northern Premier League. I'm going to back Blue Star to win this one by 2-1. Shildon versus Ashington. I'm going to pick out because I think that's an interesting one. Why do I think that's interesting? Because both of these teams, well, Ashington are currently in the Northern Premier League Division 1 East, and Shildon were relatively recently as well. They're now a team which finished second in the Northern League Division 1 last season, but missed out on the playoffs. And they've reached the second round, actually, of the FA Cup before in 1936-37. And they've also played up against York City at a different time in the first round. So they are a team that is, I would say, a good team because they've actually also been in the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2012-13. They were in the quarterfinals of the FA Amateur Cup in 1958-59. They are a team which, Shildon this is, that you would definitely say are a big club in non-league circles, that is. Ashington, well, they're even bigger, arguably, because they were once in the Football League. They were elected into the 3rd Division North of the Football League in 1921. So they've reached the 3rd round of the FA Cup before in 1926-27, where they lost 2-0 at home to Nottingham Forest. They are certainly a team that have absolutely been all over the place. They've been in the Northern Alliance before. They've been in the Football League before. They've been in the Midland League before. They've been in the Northern Premier League, actually. back in the 1960s, but have spent a lot of time in the Northern League and are now on the ascendancy, having finished 16th last season in the Northern Premier League, looking quite comfortable. I was at one of their home games as an away fan with, I think I was with Belper at the time last season. They're certainly a team that are absolutely great. They've been in the FA Amateur Cup semi-finals. They've been in the 5th round of the FA Vase, 3rd round of the FA Cup. They've been in other times going deep in the FA Cup before, because they reached the 2nd round before in 1950, where their record attendance stands up against Rochdale. So yeah, both of these teams are coming in with huge pedigrees, and I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw in this one. But I think Ashington will win the replay at home. Guisborough Town versus Consett. I think Guisborough are an interesting team on the basis that they are at home, so could potentially cause an upset in this regard. They have reached also the 1st round of the FA Cup back in 1988-89, where they were at home to Bury, moving the game to Ayresome Park, where Middlesbrough's ground is. They won, Bury won 1-0, so it was a close game in front of 5,990 fans, which is understandably, I think, their record attendance in a game. I mean, it says the FA Vase semi-final, which they beat versus Hungerford, might be because they reached the FA Vase final in 1979-80. So they are also well rehearsed in cup competitions historically. They're hosting Consett, which are in the league above, finished mid-table in the league above. They're certainly they've been in the 1st round of the FA Cup twice, in 1958-59 and 1996-97. In those ones, they lost 5-0 to Doncaster Rovers in a 58-59 competition, and 4-0 to Mansfield Town. So once they're actually at the 1st round, they didn't do an incredibly great job. But they've also recently been successful in the FA Vase. In 2019-20, they reached the final of the FA Vase, lost 3-2 to Hebburn. So yeah, they're certainly both of these teams, I think, have got caliber in cup competitions. I think Consett are slightly better at the moment. 2-0 to Consett. Whitley Bay versus Heaton Stannington. I've actually not been to Whitley Bay's stadium for, it feels, ages now. It's been at least 3 years, I think. I went to Heaton Stannington at the end of last season for the last game of the season. I do like Grandsall Park. I think it's a good stadium. I think Heaton Stannington in the league above, but could potentially an upset be on the cards here? I'm thinking yes. At home, Whitley Bay, I think I'm going to go with 1-1 draw to Whitley Bay, and they're going to win the replay. So I think that's going to be an upset in this one, which won't please my friend who is a Heaton Stannington fan, who I know from church. We have gone and stood together in the crowd and supported Heaton Stannington together. Crook Town versus Kendal Town. Of course, I'm going to mention Crook. If you don't know why, you may not know much about non-league football, because they have won the FA Amateur Cup a total of 5 times. They've been to the 3rd round of the FA Cup. They've been in the quarterfinals of the FA Vase. They've been in the 3rd round of the FA Trophy. I'm going to bring up a 3rd round of the FA Cup one in the 1930s, the 31-32 season, which was incredible. They beat Stockport County 3-1 in the 1st round, then defeated Aldershot 1-0 in the 2nd round. They were then drawing against First Division Leicester City in the third round, but did lose 7-0 at Filbert Street. But they're certainly a team which has got a lot of FA Cup heritage. So they're certainly a team to keep tabs on, so to speak. They are hosting Kendal Town, a team that I've seen a few times now. I'm always quite impressed by the away following in Kendal Town, considering how awkward some of the games are to get to in the Northern League from where they are. They've been in the second round of the FA Cup twice, in 1949-50 and 1963-64. They beat North Shields 4-3 in the first round in the first time they went in, but then lost 6-0 to Watford in the second. And then in the 1952-53 one, they lost 3-0 to Gainsborough Trinity in a first round replay. They've just had a lot of Football League opposition before, in terms of that, and they were actually known as Netherfield for a bit, and they were founding members of Northern Premier League. It's a difficult one. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw here. I think they're both good, but I think Crooktown are going to win the game and on the replay. After 1-1, I think Crooktown win it on the replay. Brighouse Town versus Frickley Athletic. Frickley Athletic, sometimes known as the York City Feeder Club because of the amount of youngsters that Frickley have, which go there. Brighouse Town actually has one of the best women's team for a non-league team. The women's team outstrips performances of a men's team, certainly. And Brighouse weren't looking comfortable last season, so that'll be an interesting one. And I don't think they've got any noticeable pedigree in this tournament. Whereas you look at Frickley, that is known to have reached the third round of the FA Cup in 1985-86. They're a very historic club, actually, Frickley. So, because they were entered into the Alliance Premier League, which is now a National League, in 1980-81. And they certainly had a golden era, so to speak, and are unfortunately no longer at that peak. But a lot of people of a certain age may remember the time that they went from being in the Northern Premier League in the 1970s and 1980s, when the Alliance Premier League stroke conference, finishing highest in second, actually, in 1985-86, when they also reached that third round of the FA Cup, before then getting relegated the season after, and spending a lot of time in the Northern Premier League after that, but only in the last 10 years or so have the wheels unfortunately fallen off a bit, and they've tumbled into the ninth tier. They're certainly somebody who could be mentioned, I suppose, as a team in the fallen giants in non-league, which I might do a video of at some point this season. So yeah, I'm going to go Brighouse Town to win this one because of the fallen giant nature. 3-1 to Brighouse Town. Let's see if this year is the year that they're going to get a good cup run. Wythenshawe Town versus Prestwich Hayes. Wythenshawe is another one I'm going to pick out because Wythenshawe were actually reprieved from relegation last season, because they were promoted the season before that to the Northern Premier League Division 1A West, and they were reprieved because of there was some team which withdrew or something like that, and so, but they've been in the quarterfinals recently, the FA Vars in 2021-22. They've last season went to a second qualifying round of the FA Trophy. I think they're actually a team potentially on the up, considering they managed to beat Bury to get promoted to the Northern Premier League Division 1 West. So yeah, I think Wythenshawe are a team which could potentially have a good season. They're up against Prestwich Hayes, which admittedly I don't know a lot about. But I know that they've reached the quarterfinal of the FA Amateur Cup before, and the third round of the FA Vars. But yeah, I just think this could be a bit of a interesting mismatch. I am going to say that Wythenshawe win this one 3-1. Yeah. Pilkington versus Longridge Town. I'm picking this one out because I think it's going to be an absolute corker, a 9-goal thriller. I think Longridge Town are going to win this one by 6-3. That's the only reason I'm picking this one out, because I think it's going to be an absolute thriller. Parkgate versus Eccleshill United. Parkgate are a team which are... Is this the... that they were actually fairly recently in the Northern Counties Division 1, and they were promoted in 2023-24. I'm just interested if they will be able to better themselves this season in terms of in the FA Cup performance-wise, because I think they are a team which are going places. They finished 11th last season, and I actually think there's underlying potential that they will do quite well in the upcoming thing. We're up against Eccleshill United, who are based in Rose, which is a place in Bradford. And they have been in the 5th round of the FA Vars before. I just think it may just be quite a standard game for a lot of people, but I just think it's going to be one of them ones which they've both actually been promoted fairly recently to Tier 9. And I'm going to go 2-1 to Parkgate because I think it is a club you need to watch out for in the future. Glossop North End versus FC St Helens. Of course, I can't miss the Glossop North End story when I have the chance. Having been the smallest ever team represented in the top flight of England, they were in the 1st division at one point. A tiny club in Glossop North End, but the league that eventually became the Premier League they were in. And they're at home against FC St Helens, which is actually quite a new club, so to speak. They were founded in 2014, and the first time they were in the FA Cup was last season because they were promoted from the North West Counties League Division 1 North in 2023-24. Now, there's been plenty of teams from St Helens in the FA Cup in the past, but I want to see if they can better their performance from last season, because they got knocked out in the first stage. I don't think they can, though. I am going to back my Derbyshire team to win this one. I'm going to go 2-0 to Glossop North End. Charnock Richard versus Burscough. Charnock Richard are an interesting one, I would say, because not last season, the season before, they reached the 4th round of the FA Vars. They did a very good job, and they are a team which were in the playoffs in 2023-24 as well in the Northwest Counties League. I don't think they were as good last season, but I think if they improve this season, then they could definitely go back to aiming on the up. And you've also got Burscough, which are a team that have reached the 2nd round of the FA Cup within the 21st century in 2005-6, actually, which is 18 years ago now, something like that. They defeated League One side Gillingham 3-2 at Victoria Park before losing to Burton Albion at that point in time. And they were in 2006-07 they won the Northern Premier League Premier Division, and certainly a team that were which were very strong within recent years. They also won the FA Trophy in 2002-03. Reached the 5th round of the FA Vase in 1994-95. So yeah, if you go back to the late 90s and the early noughties, they were a team to be beaten in non-league. They were a good, solid team in non-league. I don't think they are anymore. And I'm going to back Charlotte Richard to win this one 2-1. Abbey Hay versus AFC Liverpool. Abbey Hay, I really like the logo, by the way, are a team that haven't done much in their history. They were promoted from the Northwest Counties League Division 1 South in 2023-24 via the playoffs, and so haven't had much experience in the FA Cup. They have reached the second qualifying round twice in 2012, 2013, and 2015-16, but they've never been one of the big hitters in the non-league circle. So I think there is a possibility that they may be able to. You've got AFC Liverpool, which were formed in 2008, so a relatively recent club again, and ones which are certainly they were a team which were fortunate to be promoted during the COVID years due to their performances over COVID. So yeah, I think they're one of them. They're one of them ones which is a team which is not for profit. It's a fan-owned club. It's one of them ones which very community-based. I think either of these can actually have a standout FA Cup campaign. I'm not sure which one yet, so I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw, and I think AFC Liverpool will win the replay. Of course, I'm going to mention Bury as a team to pick out because Bury are a fallen giant in all senses of a word in one sense and all sense of a word, not the word in the other sense, because the only reason they're this low is because of financial mismanagement, whereas they were in the Football League before. They've won the FA Cup twice, the only team which are at this stage of the competition to have won it twice. And I think at some point they're going to be the only side to have reached every stage of the FA Cup, which I think might be an impressive record to hold. But actually, South Liverpool are a Phoenix club of an earlier South Liverpool. They were refounded in 1991, but there was a South Liverpool in the 1930s, which regularly applied for application to get elected to the Football League. And they kind of wanted to be a team to compete with Liverpool, actually, and apply to join the Football League 10 different times. They won the Welsh Cup in 1939, defeating Cardiff City 2-1 in the final. They are certainly, the older team that is, a great team because they reached the second round of the FA Cup 3 times. And so, yeah, they're certainly a historic club. They recently as well had success. They reached the 4th round of the FA Vase in 2023-24. And were promoted from Northwest Counties League Division 1 North at that point in time as well. So it is one of them ones that both of these teams got huge pedigree from the past. I do think at Gig Lane, Bury will win this one, 2-0 Bury, and I would be a fool to have not selected Bury as a team to talk about in this predictions. Chadderton versus Stockport Town is, well, I mentioned this because in recent years, I think Chadderton have been growing from strength to strength. They were promoted in 2022-23 to the Northwest Counties League, and since then I think they've been knocking on door on the playoffs of the Northwest Counties League Premier Division. I think they're a club which is really travelling in the right direction, and they're at home to Stockport Town, which is another one of them teams which is heading in the right direction. You may have heard Stockport Town from the fact that they actually had Robbie Savage at the club, signing in November 2019. After his last professional game had been in 2011, right? It was a bit of a mad signing. But they're a team which has actually been, again, another one which I think have been on the up. They've only been in the FA Cup twice, and that's the last 2 seasons. So yeah, these are 2 teams I think which are on the up and ones to keep your eye on in the future. I think Chadderton will win this one because home advantage. 2-0 Chadderton, but I won't be surprised seeing either of these ones growing in the near future. Handsworth versus Silsden. I know there's somebody who's a fan of Handsworth, so I am going to, or not necessarily a fan, but is one of their teams that they keep an eye on. And so that's why I'm going to mention Handsworth in this one. Because they're a team that just sort of a very regular bog standard team, and there's not much actually to say about Handsworth. They've mainly been in the 9th tier for as long as I can remember. But they're hosting Silsden, who were promoted from the Northern Counties East League last season, winning the title. And so the question is how can they adapt to the league above? I think they'll win this one very narrowly, a 1-0 win to Silsden. Winsford United versus West Didsbury and Chorlton. I saw West Didsbury and Chorlton last season in the FA Vars as they made the long trip over to North Shields, where an amazing game unfolded. It really did. But actually, you look at them, they reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 2022-23. They had their best FA Cup run last season. They finished in the playoffs, I want to say, last season, or just short of the playoffs, rather. They were in 5th. Paul Marshall is the manager. And if you know about Paul Marshall, he was a player who he was an under-20 England international in 2009 from Man City's academy. And is somebody who has a bit of Football League experience behind him, but never really cracked it. But the reason I talk about Paul Marshall, in a sense, is he was the reason that Micah Richards came to the North Shields game, because they knew each other, because they were from the academy together and were good friends together. And so it was a little bit of an interesting one. But I was in the same stadium as Micah Richards, non-league round in the Northeast. And it's like, what's going on? So they're an interesting one, and I definitely think are going in a good way. And then they're up against Winsford United, who have decided to actually now accept themselves to be in the Midland League. They got promoted last season to the North West Counties League, Division 1 South, because they opted to have a relegation because they didn't want to play in the Midland League, but now they do, so it's fine. They're a weird team. They've reached the first round, though, of the FA Cup on 3 separate occasions. They've reached the FA Trophy quarterfinals before. They're certainly one of the bigger teams in Cheshire, in non-league circles anyway. They've previously been in the Northern Premier League, Premier Division before. That they did lose against Wrexham 5-2 in 1991. But they also lost against Peterborough United. But they're not a bad thing. And actually, they at one point had on their books Welsh international goalkeeper Neville Southall. So the more you know. So these are an interesting one. But actually, I think West Didsbury and Chorlton will win this one 2-0 to West Didsbury and Chorlton. Bradford Park Avenue and Mosley. Do you remember when I used to cover Bradford Park Avenue on this channel on a regular because they were in the National League North? Well, now they're in Tier 8. It's an absolute madness. I mean, Bradford Park Avenue were also in the First Division at one point. So that makes it the third team I've spoken about who used to be in the First Division and now in the extra preliminary round of the FA Cup. So just proves that you can be at the top, but you can still fall down flat as well. And they've actually done quite well in the FA Cup historically. I mean, not as well as their rivals Bradford City, but they're a team that, I mean, purely on the fact that how good they were in the 1910s, I think tells you all you need to know, really. So they're certainly a team which I think is maybe worth doing a dive deep into at one point, maybe as part of that video I've already mentioned. They're at home to Mosley, which are a team which have reached the second round of the FA Cup twice. They've been in the quarterfinals of the FA Vars 3 times, all in the in the late 90s, early noughties. They were finalists of the FA Trophy before. So they're certainly a team which has history in this competition also. They've beaten Crewe Alexandra before losing to Mansfield Town in the second round of the FA Cup at one point. And so, yeah, this is an interesting one because both of these teams, I think, have had marked periods of success in the past, but not so much at present. I think Bradford Park Avenue will win this one, running out 4-1 winners. Let's go with Runcorn Linnets versus Clitheroe. Runcorn Linnets are a team that was formed in 2006 as a Phoenix club for a team called Runcorn FC Halton. They were in the Northern Premier League and resigned because of financial difficulties. But actually, that Runcorn team is a team which has masses of history. They won the 1981-82 Alliance Premier League title. As I said, that's now the National League. And the only reason they weren't promoted to the Football League is because the members decided that they didn't want to, which was a bold choice, which probably forever ruined that club. And so then they folded. And then Runcorn Linnets came along as the Phoenix club. And they've gradually been sort of building up from scratch all over again. Their average attendance last season was 533. They're now regularly in the Northern Premier League. They actually lost the playoff semi-final. They were in the Northern Premier League West Division. They were in the playoffs 3 seasons in a row between 2021 and 22 and 2023-24. And they were actually Cheshire Cup Senior Cup winners last season. So they're certainly one which you can keep an eye on. But I think they might get dumped out here because they're up against a Clitheroe side that is a team which are also in the Northern Premier League Division 1 West. They have reached the final of the FA Vars in 1995-96 and also the semi-final in 2000 and 2001. They have been one of them teams that I think are going in the right direction. Now, they've spent a fair few years now in the Northern Premier League. So the question remains, can they actually do anything serious enough? But that's an interesting one. I think Clitheroe might win this one. 3-0 to Clitheroe, and I'm going for the shock. We'll go with Hinckley versus Highgate United. Spent enough time in the north west of England, to the Midlands. And Hinckley was formed in 2014 as a Phoenix club of Hinckley United. Now, if you knew about Hinckley United, you know that is a team that has had lots of history, so to speak, in the non-league game, considering they've been in the they were in the Conference North between 2004-05 and 2012-13, and it's in a sense quite unfortunate what happened to them. So their Phoenix club, Hinckley FC, is now actually a team which is in Tier 9. So it's really had a fall off since then. They do actually have the record for the highest goal scoring match in the FA Vase, beating St Martin's 18-0. So that is the biggest win in FA Vase history, which is absolutely ridiculous. They were promoted from the Midland League Division 1 only 2 seasons back. They're a team which are trying to build themselves up. But they, saying that, they did take a voluntary, or they, not voluntary, but they decided not to go and get promoted a few times. It's a bit odd one. But they're up against Highgate United, which scored an absolute screamer, I think, in the FA Cup. It may be last season. But they were certainly had some sort of screamer, which I saw popping up. And maybe should have been relegated from Midland League last season. They got reprieved from that. The season before that, they were in the playoffs up against Lichfield and lost in the semi-finals. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. They were semi-finalists of the FA Amateur Cup in 1972-73. This could be a very interesting game for me. I'm going Hinckley to win this one 3-1. Coleshill Town versus Nuneaton Town. Okay, of course, I'd also be a fool to not mention Nuneaton Town, the Phoenix Club of Nuneaton Borough. But the history of Nuneaton's football is vast and deserves a whole video and merit on its own. And they're up against they got promoted, of course, last season. They're up against a team actually in the league above in Coleshill Town, and one which was actually quite good as well, because they were in the playoffs recently in 2022-23 in Tier 8. They've also reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2016-17. Quite a difficult challenge, I think, Nuneaton to face. But I think Nuneaton will absolutely batter them. I think Nuneaton are going to win this one 6-0, which I think, is that an upset or not? Let me know in the comment section down below if you think that's an upset. Because Nuneaton obviously were before higher, but they were promoted from Tier 10 last season. So, is it an upset? Is it not? It's a bit odd. Romulus versus Coventry Sphinx. Romulus are a team that haven't had really much success. I mean, they've been in the Southern League before, and in the Northern Premier League before. But COVID did slightly mess them around a bit, and yeah, I think Romulus are just a team which is just always there. I don't know if there's anything notable about them. So it'll be interesting if we can play. They've got home advantage against Coventry Sphinx, who are in the league above. So could have an upset. But Coventry Sphinx is one of them teams that they reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2007-8, and are a team, I think, on the rise. They earned promotion in 2022-23 to the Northern Premier League, and I think they're going in the right direction. And I do think the former works team of Armstrong at Sidley are going to win this one 4-0. We shall go on to Hanley Town versus Lichfield City, because these are two clubs going in completely different directions. Hanley are in freefall. They have been relegated to the Midland League Premier Division. At the end of last season, they were relegated, finishing 21st in the Northern Premier League Division 1 West. They're a team that I really would have expected them to be better than they currently are. Purely on the basis that actually they've spent so much years now in the Northern Premier League. Since 2014-15 million promotion. So they're back down in Tier 9 at this level. But they're up against Lichfield City, who were winners of the Midland League last season. And have taken their place. So the two teams which are going opposite directions as I'm currently speaking. They're a team which also a couple of seasons back reached the fourth round of the FA Vars. And I think Lichfield are certainly a team with potential, considering how big the area is that they have to draw on, the success they've had in the recent years. I think we were in Tier 10 not that long ago. I think this will be a 2-2 draw here. And I think Hanley will win the replay, which will be considered an upset. But at the same time, Hanley, it wouldn't have been an upset last season, if you get what I'm trying to say. We'll go on to Eastwood Community versus Gresley Rovers. I've seen Gresley Rovers reserves before at Teversal, and I've seen Eastwood play at home before on it's a lovely ground, Eastwood. So if you've never been, I do recommend it. Eastwood are a former Northern Premier League team, you see. And so they've got a 3G pitch and great big stands and a very archetypal Northern Premier League team. They were formed, the current Eastwood Community were actually formed as a Phoenix club to Eastwood Town, which was the team which was actually in the Northern Premier League. So they've inherited their facilities. And the only thing really of much note is the fourth round run to the FA Vars. So the Eastwood Community has certainly not managed to follow the footsteps of their Coronation Park predecessors in I think they were just called they were called Eastwood Town, weren't they? Who were a good team in their heyday, and they're up against Gresley Rovers, who performed the Great Escape last season. They looked destined to relegation to Tier 10, yet they managed to pull themselves out. The team from basically Swaddling Coat. I would like to win. They've reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 2009-10. They were runners-up in the FA Vars in 1990-91. They reached the first round of the FA Cup at one point, actually, in 1930-31. And they've also been in the Southern League before. So it's hard to tell which one's the bigger club out of these two. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. And I think I've got to back my Derbyshire lads, Gresley Rovers, to win the replay. We'll do ASC Rushden and Diamonds versus Grimsby Borough, because this is a really fascinating one. ASC Rushden and Diamonds, obviously a Phoenix club at Rushden and Diamonds. This Rushden and Diamonds at one point would have played Grimsby Town back in the Football League days. And so how far have Rushden Diamonds really fallen? And I know it's not the same club, but even so, they shouldn't be as low as Tier 8. They should have been on the up, so to speak. They had seasons where they were in the Northern Premier League. Sorry, not they were in the Southern League, rather, Premier Division Central between 2018 and 19 season and 2022-23. It's a bit odd that they've been in fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup as well, and they were actually runners up. They were a team which they were just outside the playoffs. That was it in 2021-22, and since then the wheels have just completely fallen off the club, I think. So to be in this stage of competition is a bit of an underperformance. I thought they would continue going to strength. They're up against a team which was formed in 2003 in Grimsby Borough, which, to be honest, they were promoted to the Northern Premier League in 2021-22. But they're really a team with no history, actually. They're forming history now. And so this game is a very interesting one. I think this will be a 1-1 draw. And I think I'm going to back AFC Rushden Diamonds to win for replay. Aylstone Park versus Northampton Sileby Rangers. Aylstone Park finished as runners-up in the United Counties League Premier Division South last season. I marked these out because I think this is a team which is going in the right direction now. I think this is second ever time entering the FA Cup, with the last time being in 2017-18, when we were one of the lucky teams from Tier 10 to be administered in. And they were promoted from the United County League Division 1 in 2022-23. And since then, have just been going from strength to strength. So I mark this one out as a team to sort of keep your eye on in the future, up against the Northampton Selby Rangers, which have never really had much sort of greatness themselves, to be honest. A lot of the time they've been in the United Counties League for a while, because the United Counties League used to be more Northamptonshire, Peterborough sort of way based, and that's changed over the years. But yeah, they're the side which haven't had much FA Cup history. So both of these coming into this are actually relatively inexperienced in this competition. So I'll be interested to see how far either of these sides go. I know Elston Park to win this one 2-1. Daventry Town versus Leicester Nirvana. I'm picking out Daventry here because they were a side which was relatively recently in the Northern Premier League. Were they not? Yes, they were. And they were relegated not last season, the season before, if I'm not mistaken. And they reached the first round of the FA Cup in 2013-14. So again, another one of them sort of great history sort of ones. That it was they were drawn away to Chesterfield and lost the tie 2-0. They're a side which reached the fifth round of the FA Vase last season. So they're certainly a team which I think people were expecting quite high things of. They're up against a Leicester Nirvana team, which reached the fifth round of the FA Vase in 2018-19. But other than that, haven't really had a lot of huge history. They've been a fairly consistent team in the United Counties League for the past 10 years or so. So yeah, it's one of them ones that you definitely would expect Daventry Town to win this one. 4-1 to Daventry. Harrowby United versus Bourne Town. I saw Harrowby at one point. I weren't a huge fan of them. I'm not going to lie. I think they were slightly arrogant. But they are a team on the up. They're third time entering the FA Cup. They got promoted from the United Counties League Division 1 in 2023-24. So yes, if they can win this, then they match their best ever FA Cup performance essentially. But they are up against a Bourne Town side which got promoted to the Northern Premier League Division 1 Midlands last season. A team that I absolutely did not expect to be anywhere near this level. They're a side which were not that far in 2023-24, won promotion from a Division 1 in the United Counties League. They're a team that is on the real up at the moment. Really are. They're actually nicknamed the Wakes due to Hereward the Wake, which was a Anglo-Saxon rebel against the Normans. So there's a little bit of local history, and obviously well, maybe not obviously if you don't know, but we'll skip over that bit. But I think Bourne Town will win this one 2-0, but it could be a possible upset. I'm just liking seeing where Harrowby are going over recent years. Boston Town versus Kimberley Miners Welfare. Boston Town were in the playoffs and lost in a playoff final last season, United Counties League Division North playoffs. And so they're a side which I'm interested to see how well they do this season. because they reached the first round of the FA Cup back in 1976-77. They've reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 1993-94. They had a former Nottingham Forest player on their cards at one point in Gary Bull, and he scored 57 goals in the 2006-7 season. So that's something which is I don't think ever going to be beaten. But yeah, Boston Town, the lesser known of the Boston teams, is actually doing bits down in Tier 9. And they're hosting Kimberley Miners Welfare, which are a team which are also getting up. They got promoted from United County League Division 1 in 2021-22. They're at their highest level they've ever been. They've not done a lot in the FA Cup, I'm not going to lie. So it is remaining to be seen which one will win this one. I am going to have to back Boston Town, though. 2-0 winners for the Stumps. Let's move on to Harleston Town versus Walsham Le Willows. Why do I say this? Well, Harleston are a team that they had their best FA Cup and FA Vase performance last season, and that wasn't even actually a great season because they have been a team that's really been in obscurity for the last few years. Well, not obscurity, but in the feeder leagues, and they're on a team on the up, and they got promoted in 2021-22, and since then have really found their level in Tier 9. And they're a team which I think are improving compared to a team like Walsham Le Willows, which was a team which I think have been rubbish in the FA Cup to date, but they reached the fourth round of the FA Vase last season and the season before that, and were in the playoff finals of the Eastern Counties League Premier Division last season. So it's one of them ones that one has got something to prove in the FA Cup, but is doing well in the league. The other one is just sort of floating in the league. And I actually think Harleston Town will do this because I think Walsham Le Willows are rubbish in the FA Cup competition. 3-2 to Harleston Town. Heacham versus Newmarket Town. Heacham, if you don't know, are an absolutely legendary team in terms of historic things. In 2022, so in 2022, they had their 7th consecutive promotion, and they were admitted into the Eastern Counties Division 1 North. Right? In 2022-23, they went and did one better and got 8 consecutive promotions. 8 consecutive promotions. Do you know how mad it is to get 8 consecutive? I can't believe it in terms of how much this team has gone up and up and up, you know. And they're up against a team in Newmarket in the league above. Now, they just stayed up last season, Newmarket. They earned promotion to the Isthmian League in 2023-24. It's an interesting one because I think both of these ones are actually going in the right direction. Newmarket Town reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2005-06, and they reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1992-93. If Heacham win this, I think it is an upset. But I do think Newmarket will win this one, 5-2. I'm sorry to build in this one up. Ipswich Wanderers versus Lakenheath. Ipswich Wanderers have gone all over the place recently. They went up from Tier 10 to Tier 9. They then went up to last season in the Isthmian League. And then last season they went back down. So they've been all over the shop sort of thing. Actually, I think their history is almost mirroring the case of Ipswich Town at the moment, because they got promoted in They got promoted in 2022-23 actually. So maybe if they manage to continue to replicate that, they'd be in the league above, and then they won't be relegated last season. Back down to this meeting. But I mean, it's even so. There's still a team which are very good in terms of recent years, having some success. And they're up against a Lakenheath side that I don't think are very good in these competitions. FA Vars, they did reach the fourth round in 2021-22, but I think they're rubbish in the FA Cup. And I think they're one of them teams which will be looking over their shoulder this season rather than up. But I think we might get an upset. I think Lakenheath will win this one 3-2, because you've seen Ipswich have gone down. And yeah, I'm thinking an upset in terms of this one. Cornard United versus Woodbridge Town. I'm going to point this one out purely on the fact that I think Woodbridge are going to win this one 6-0. It's a big, heavy scoring one. I think Cornard are rubbish at the moment. Gorleston versus Hadley United. Gorleston, I think, probably one of the highest ranked teams in the FA Cup at the moment, because they were just knocking on the door of the playoffs in the East Midlands League North Division last season. So if they do not win this, it is well and truly a FA Cup upset. They reached the first round of the FA Cup twice, both during the 1950s, where they actually managed to they drew 2-2 against Leyton Orient, and then another 0-0 draw, and then they meant to play at Arsenal's Highbury, which was actually a 5-4 win for Leyton Orient, but Gorleston were 4-1 down at one point in the match, so it wasn't as competitive as maybe is led on. And then they also had a 10-1 loss against Gillingham, but certainly a team Gorleston which you'd expect to do well in the FA Cup this season, considering how well they're doing in the league at the moment. They're up against a team in Hadley United, which are struggling to stay in the Eastern Counties League, right? And they've been in quarterfinals of the FA Vars, but that's probably their only notable success. I do think Gorleston will win this one 2-0. But I think it is a given in a sense. Fakenham Town versus Wroxham is an interesting one, because Fakenham are a team which almost got promoted from the Eastern Counties League last season, missing out on the title and goal difference, and lost 1-0 in the playoff semi-finals against Walsham Le Willows. So actually, I think they're a team that you'd really expect to do well this season, but they're going to try and get the upset by beating Wroxham, which finished in 17th in the Isthmian North Division last season, albeit they were admittedly promoted from the Eastern Counties Premier Division in 2021-22, but they also finalists in the FA Vars in 2009-10. I think, for me, it's a given. Wroxham are going to win this one 4-1. Now, I could be wrong. Fakenham could provide an upset. That's why I mention it. But it's one of them ones that I just don't see happening. Haverhill Rovers versus Wisbech Town. Haverhill are back. They got promoted last season by winning the Eastern Counties League Division 1 North. They've been in the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup before in 2006-07. They reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 1986-87. They're a team that have had immense successes before. They were knocked out, losing 4-0 conference team at Aldershot Town in that FA Cup time, by the way. But they were, at the time, a team in the Division 1 of the Eastern Counties League. So Haverhill are certainly a team that I think they're back and they're up against a Wisbech Town, which actually last season finished 15th, and a poor season, all things considering. Considering this team has been twice in the semi-finals of the FA Vase and twice in the second round of the FA Cup in 1957-58 and 1997-98. They beat Colchester United 1-0 in the first round and then lost 2-1 at Reading in that 57-58 one. And then in the 1990s, they lost 5-1 to Kingstonian in the first round of the FA Cup, but went into the Southern League at that same season. And also in the first round of the FA Cup again in 1996, 97, losing St Albans City, reaching the second round by beating Billericay Town 2-1 before losing 2-0 home to Bristol Rovers. So actually, they're a team with a lot of history. They've recently even been in the Northern Premier League, only getting relegated in 2021-22. And so they're a team on a downwards trajectory. Haverhill on the way up. I think this could be a cheeky 4-3 win for Haverhill Rovers. I think it'll be a really exciting game. And we really see the demise of Wisbech. Stowmarket Town versus Ely City. Stowmarket were recently in the Isthmian League, if I remember rightly. They were relegated in 2023-24. I was right. They're a team that finished lower mid-table last season. They're a team in regress. But I more want to point out Ely City, which finished 4th last season, reaching, I think it was the, I think they reached the FA, not the FA, they lost in the semi-finals, but they were in the playoffs last season. But they reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1956-57, the 5th round of the FA Vase in 2016-17. But I want to point out that I remember they had a fairly decent run in the FA Cup. I can't remember when it was, but it was relatively recently had a good run in the FA Cup. So I'm wondering if they can repeat that. I think they will do so here. 2-1 Ely City. Mildenhall Town versus Downham Town. Mildenhall Town are in the Isthmian League and finished 15th last season. And they were promoted as Eastern Counties Premier Division champions last season. Well, playoff winners of the Eastern Counties, of the season before last, rather, was Downham Town won Eastern Counties League Premier Division promotion by the playoffs last season. So I think both teams are actually on a really good run at the moment, because actually, I think the more impressive one is Downham Town. Seemingly they got promoted in 2022-23. And so they've really been going up in stages and getting promoted. And I was really surprised to see them in the Isthmian League here. I think Mildenhall may just put an end to a bit of that rise, maybe, with a 2-0 win here, because I think they're going to be marginally better in the Cup. But we'll see. We'll go Baldock Town versus Little Oakley. This is in part because we know Baldock Town have had times that they've recently been on decent runs. They reached the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1991-92 and 1999-900. They were in the Southern League Premier Division in the 1990s. There was certainly a team in the 1990s which were flying really high, but unfortunately now they've slumped into, and they've finished 14th in the Spartan South Midlands. Whereas they're up against a Little Oakley team that had only recently entered the Essex Senior League in 2021 based on the COVID results, and I can't remember if I'm misremembering this one, but they did an absolutely incredible FA Cup run recently. So it's hard to tell. I'm going to go Little Oakley to win this one 3-1. Kempston Rovers versus Arlesey Town. Kempston Rovers are a team who are down. They finished 16th in the Spartan South Midlands League Premier Division last season, just for the relegation zone. They've been tumbling of late. They were in the Southern League for so long in the Division 1 Central and were relegated in 2023-24 and have not had a great track record since that relegation. Their best performance in the FA Cup has been a fourth qualifying round in 1978-79. You just expect with Kempston Rovers that they would have been doing slightly better. And they're up against an Arlesey Town that are actually more on a rise. They won the FA Vars in 1994-95. They reached the first round of the FA Cup in 2011-12 and 2012-13. They've reached the fifth round of the FA Trophy in recent history. They're a team which are doing really well, actually. In the 2011-12 one, they were knocked out by Coventry City 3-0. And they've also recently been in the Southern League. So both of these teams have recently been in the Southern League. I think Kempston Rovers, though, may provide a bit of a shock. A 1-0 win, and it's the beauty of the cup that can happen. Barking versus Grays Athletic. Well, Barking are one of the old teams in the FA Cup, and what I mean by that is that they've been around for absolutely ages. They've been in the second round of the FA Cup in 1981-82. They're runners-up in the FA Amateur Cup in 1926-27. They're a team which have recently been competing in the they were in the Isthmian League for a while anyway, until they ceased to exist by merging with East Ham United to form Barking and East Ham United, which no longer exists, by the way, and folded in 2006. So it was a traditional Barking team that are the team which they've claimed credit of. They're hosting Grays Athletic in the Isthmian League, who did a very good job in the Isthmian League, who before being in the Conference League, they were in the Conference League between 2005-06 and 2009-10, having won the Conference South in 2004-05. They were winners of the FA Trophy twice in 2004-05 and 2005-06. They've been in the second round of the FA Cup in 2005-06. We all know Grays Athletic are one of them fallen giants in football, well and truly. And I think they're going to maybe one day get back to that. I think they're starting here today with a 1-0 win against Barking tomorrow, rather. White Ensign versus Sawbridge Worth Town. I think it's an interesting one because both of these teams are sort of teams on the rise, actually. White Ensign were promoted to the Essex League in 2021, but haven't really done anything in the FA Cup. Their best performance in the FA Vars came last season in the fourth round. I think White Ensign need a good cup run because they've not had one really before. And Sawbridge Worth Town haven't really had a good cup run either. So both of these teams can start a good cup run this season because both of them, I don't think, have had one necessarily in the past. I think this one's going to go to Sawbridge Worth Town 2-1. We'll go with Holbridge Sports versus Basildon United. About halfway through these FA Cup ones, hence why I did not do absolutely every single one of them. Holbridge Sports are a team which have reached the second qualifying round as their best performance in the FA Cup. They reached the fourth round of the FA Vars in 4 separate occasions. But they're really a team that came out of absolutely nowhere to an extent. They got to the Essex Senior League in 1990 and were just sort of averagely there, And then in 2018-19, they got promoted to the Isthmian League North Division, but were relegated back in 2022-23. I just think they're just a very bog standard Essex Senior League team, almost relegated last season, actually. They finished 18th. So they're back on the sort of downer, so to speak. But you've also got Basildon United, which were relegated from Isthmian League North Division last season. And they've reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vase before. But I think both of these teams are in a bit of a downward trajectory at the moment. I think Basildon United will win this one 2-1. We'll be interested to see if any of these ones can correct their form in the league. You got Stanway Rovers versus Romford. I mentioned this because Stanway Rovers have had a historic promotion last season, winning the Essex Senior League, getting promoted to the Isthmian League North Division for the first time ever. And this team is absolutely tiny in terms of like the area they're in. In a place called Stanway, which has a population of 9,600, which isn't too small, but it's a village essentially. It's a larger village, which have been growing recently, which is mainly known for a thing called the Ruid of Colchester. Which is an archaeological site that they dug up. So they're at home to a team called Romford, which is a much bigger population area. We know that Romford have got a huge population in terms of compared to the actual size of their football team. So like it's over 100,000. Like it's one of them absolutely mental ones that you're comparing minnows to big places, so to speak. And Romford were FA Vase winners in 2023-24. They've been in the Southern League. They actually won the Southern League Premier Division in 1966-67. They've been in the Isthmian League. They've been in quarterfinals of the FA Cup in 1880-81. One of them OG old school ones. They're a huge name in the FA Cup. So if Stanway managed to get a result here, that could be a huge one. I think they'll get a 1-1 draw, and I think Stanway Rovers will win the replay, which will be huge for that club. Takeley versus Crawley Green. Takeley got promoted to the Isthmian League North Division last season. Pretty certain for the first time as well. They were one which became as a bit of a shock, and I don't think they've ever had a good FA Cup performance. Anyway, they reached the third round of the FA Vase last season. They are a team which I think could this be their first proper cup run? Now they're in the level above, and they're up against a Crawley Green side who, again, I don't think have really had much of a cup run before. I don't think they're overly a decent team. They were at 1 point in the Isthmian League, I think. So, yeah, I think there's definitely potential here, and I think Takeley will win this one and take the opportunity and win 5-2. Biggleswade versus Welwyn Garden City. Of the many Biggleswade teams, there's like 3. It's absolutely ridiculous. This one was knocking on the door of the playoffs for the Southern League Division 1 Central last season. Reached the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup last season. And been in the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2018-19. In 2023-24, in the 3rd qualifying round of the FA Trophy. This is the team. If there's any Biggleswade team that you have to pick out the 3, this is the one which is going places and going in the right direction. And they were only formed in 2016. They're a team which, well and truly, you can put your might behind. They're up against a Welwyn Garden City team that is also probably knocking on the doors of the playoffs of the Southern League Central. And so it's going to be quite a difficult one to choose between these two. I don't think they've been as successful historically, Welwyn Garden City, which is telling considering they've got, 2026 next year is they're going to be their centenary year. And I think Biggleswade will get themselves out in this one as 4-3 winners. Dunstable Town versus Great Wakering Rovers. Dunstable are a team which I think are going to be quite a good one. They've been in the Southern League recently. Actually, they've been in the. They could have actually reached the Conference North or South because they were in the playoffs at one point for that, and they're certainly a team which have had big moments in the past. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup in 1956-57. So we are talking a long time ago now, I suppose. But lost 3-1 to Margate. Yeah, Dunstable Town is certainly a team that historically are a bigger club than their opponents in Great Wakering Rovers, who were actually involved in the playoffs last season in the Essex Senior League and also reached the final of the FA Vase in 2023-24. They were in the Isthmian League relatively recently as well. So, but yeah, runners-up in the FA Vase in 2023-24. It's certainly a team which, at this level, are a good team. So it'll be interesting to see which one edge out here. I'm going to go Dunstable Town to win 2-0. Ainsbury Rovers versus Potton United. Ainsbury were in the playoffs of the United Counties League last season. They reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1954-55. In 2019-20, reached the fourth round of the FA Vase. Won the United Counties League Cup last season. But actually are a side which don't have a lot of heritage to point to, so to speak, and actually doing quite well recently. Compare that to Potton United, which are a team that been in the fifth round of the FA Vase in 1989-90. I think are much similar, actually. Come to think of it, neither of them have really been much higher than Tier 9 before, so it could be an interesting one. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. I'm going to Potton United to win the replay. Stotfold versus Redbridge. Stotfold are in the Southern League Central, but they were close to relegation last season. But they've had some big players in the past, such as Mitchell Cole, who is probably known for being best during his time at Stevenage, and then unfortunately died tragically young, at the age of 27. But that he certainly was on. Graham Tomlinson, who is who ended his career with ended his career towards the end was with Stotfold, but was also known for his time at Exeter and Macclesfield. But yeah, they're a team which have got a huge amount of silverware actually, but nothing of real note, I'd say, that stands out to me. They've been in the fourth round of the FA Vase 4 times. I mean, but they've mainly been known for being in like Tier 9, Tier 10 sort of team. So being in the Southern League, there's a huge expectation, so to speak. We're up against a Redbridge side that is probably is mid-table in the Isthmian League North Division, so I think he's better than them. And they are a team that has recently won the Essex Senior Cup in 2023-24. They've reached the second round of the FA Cup in 2011-12. They've been in the Conference South before in 2004-5, when they got relegated that season. and even the 5th round of the FA Vars in 1998-99. So actually, historically, Redbridge are the bigger team. And I am going to back Redbridge, but I think it will be a narrow 1-0 win. I don't think it will be a huge endorsement. Biggleswade United versus Newport Pagnell Town. Another team which I think is going places from Biggleswade is Biggleswade United, because they were in Tier 10 at one point, relatively recently, and they have really not been that good in terms of the FA Cup. They reached the 4th round of the FA Vars in 2022-23. I remember being a Tier 10 club and then a Tier 9 club, and it was one of them ones which was a bit... it's a bit of an odd team, to be honest, but I don't think... You don't really have any points in history that you can point to and say they're a club which are going to do well. But if you look at Newport Pagnell, they're a team which were FA Vars winners in 2021-22. They were in the second qualifying round of the FA Cup 2008-9. But yeah, you point about FA Vars win and you think that they know how to deal with cup competitions. And I am going to have to back Newport Pagnell as a result. 2-0 winners, Newport Pagnell for me. Longlevens versus Fairford Town, or Longlevens. I don't know how you ever pronounce this team. And they entered the Hellenic League Premier Division for the 2015-16 season. I don't think they've done anything really great in the FA Cup, to be honest. I've been a little bit disappointed with them. And when you look at Fairford Town, it's a very similar story. I think both of these teams don't perform well in the FA Cup. So actually, whichever one of these two teams wins this could actually potentially have a good FA Cup season where in a couple of seasons' time, or next season, maybe I could say, well, look how good they were last season. But at the moment, not looking at it and seeing either side particularly good. So I think it will be a 1-1 draw and Fairford Town to win the replay. Burnham versus Holyport. Burnham are a side that been in the Southern League before. I mean, in the Premier Division of that as well, for a couple of seasons, about 10 years ago now, actually. They've been in the first round proper of the FA Cup in 2005-06, where they lost 3-1 to Aldershot Town. Been in the 4th round of the FA Trophy in 1999-2000. They've been in the semi-final of the FA Vars in 1982-83. So they're a big club, relatively speaking, and is the second oldest club in Buckinghamshire. So have that history behind them. Holyport in Berkshire, meanwhile, are a team which haven't really had much success at all. So they're looking to sort of buck the trend. They were promoted to the Combined County League Premier Division in 2021. So yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 Holyport. I think we're going to go a little bit of an upset here. Hartpury University versus Tuffley Rovers. Of course, I'm going to point out Hartpury University because this is a side that is in the Southern League Division 1 South after having back-to-back promotions from the Hellenic League Division 1 to the Southern League. They reached the semi-final of the FA Vars last season. They had their best FA Cup performance last season. They're just a team on the absolute rise at the moment. They were formed in 2020 and have since then been they've been going from strength to strength. And so therefore they're probably now favourites versus Tuffley Rovers, which wouldn't have been the case a couple of seasons back. And I don't think Tuffley Rovers have much of a place that they can point to as a reference point to being a really strong side anyway. I have a 2-2 draw here, and I think Hartpury University will win replay. Ardley United versus Aylesbury United. A side in Ardley, which Ardley United is a bit of a joke, is it? They're a side that have, again, I don't think done amazingly well before in any cup competition. Maybe it's the third round of the FA Vase, but even so, that isn't an amazing position to be. So they've got something to prove to me, and they have a chance though at home to cause an upset to Aylesbury United, managed by Dave Tootle, who made 80 appearances for Crystal Palace in the 90s and 63 for Sheffield in the 90s as well. They have reached the third round of the FA Cup as well in 1994-95 in an absolute amazing season after several great seasons in the FA Cup during the 90s. They beat Football League opposition in 1989-90 when defeated Southend United 1-0 before losing to Northampton Town after a replay in the second round. They then they were beaten by Walsall in the first round in 1990-91. They reached the second round again in 1991-92, eventually losing 3-2 to Hereford United. The first round defeat took place in 1992-93 when they were beaten 8-0 by West Bromwich Albion. But the 1994-95 season is the one which was their best to date, reaching the third round, defeating fellow non-league clubs Newport, Isle of Wight and Kingstonian before losing 4-0 at QPR. And the run included a duck walk celebration by Cliff Hercules, the club's record holder and appearance, which featured on the BBC's They Think It Is All Over programme. And there's the sort of, the stuff, like, you know it, yeah. They also reached the semi-final of the FA Trophy in 2002-03. So they're certainly a team which have had a huge bit of success in the past and have actually been in a conference as well in 1988-89. And have been in the Southern League or Isthmian League for most of their time since then. So there's definitely favourites coming into this, and I'm going to say Aylesbury will win this one. But a narrow result, 1-0. But if Ardley win this, huge shock factor in terms of that. Lydney Town versus Royal Wootton Bassett. Lydney, I thought were... I just think they've just been a team that have just been a bit average recently. They were almost relegated last season from the Hellenic League, so they've got a lot to prove this season. And they're up against Royal Wootton Bassett, who got promoted a couple of seasons back now, was it? I can't quite remember. It was... no, it was 20. So they've been around for a while, rather. But they're a team that I think neither of these teams are... I mean, they were in the playoff final, that was it, 23-24, so relatively recently, had a chance to be better. I think neither of these teams are particularly great pedigree in this competition. A 2-2 draw, and I think Royal Wootton Bassett will win on a replay. Mangotsfield United versus Bristol Manor Farm. Mangotsfield is a side that is in the playoffs of the Hellenic League. Last season, they reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 1995-96, fourth round of the FA Trophy in 2001-2, reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup on 4 separate occasions. They're a team who have been, to me, they've been in the Southern League before. They're certainly, I think, favourites coming into this competition. But they've got a difficult task against Bristol Manor Farm, who have a long-established Southern League Division 1 South team for a while now, since they were promoted to the Southern League in 2016-17 and have been pretty consistent since. Actually, in 2023-24, we're in the playoffs of that. And they've been in quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2015-16, 3 times FA Cup third qualifying round finishes. It's a difficult one to pinpoint. I think Bristol Manor Farm will get the job done. 3-0. Corsham Town versus Slimbridge. I'm picking this one out because they've been in the semi-finals of the FA Vase very recently in 2022-23. They were promoted to the Hellenic League in 2021 on COVID results. They're a team, I think, going in the right direction, actually. They're not a hugely historic club, spending most of their history, actually, in the Wiltshire League. So, in a sense, Corsham are going to be, if they can do a good run in the Cup this season, reaching maybe a third qualifying round or something like that, certainly will be a landmark season. They're hosting Slimbridge, who, again, not a lot of well-known history. They have been in the Southern League. Well, they were going to be in the Southern League, rather, but then decided to withdraw before the season started. So, yeah, I don't think either of these sides are particularly enamored on paper. I think Corsham Town will win this one 3-0. We'll go with Pagham versus Horsham, formerly YMCA, now just YM. And Pagham are a team which were in danger of relegation last season from the Southern Combination, and haven't really done much in history for me to really noteworthy then. And so they can potentially provide a bit of a run starting here against Horsham YM, who've been to the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1999-2000, been to the fourth round of the FA Vase in 1999-2000. That was sort of their best season to date. They've been in the Isthmian League before. So it's one of them ones that definitely historically Horsham YM are the favoured teams. I think Pagham will win this one 3-1. Tunbridge Wells versus Holmesdale. We'll go next because I think Tunbridge Wells are historically a decent team. They were runners-up in the FA Vase in 2013. They've been in the Southern League before. Actually, I think they're founding members potentially of the Southern League. They certainly were for. They joined it in 1906-07. So they've been around the block for a while as well. Of course, they were FA Vase runners-up in 2013, as I've already mentioned. They reached the second round of the FA Cup in 1930-31 and 1936-37. So yeah, in the 1930s, they were a big team in non-league scene. Not so much anymore, but they got a chance to get themselves on record against Holmesdale, who have, other than the FA Vase run to the fourth round last season, or the season before last rather, I don't think have ever had an impressive sort of FA Cup run of sorts. And so maybe a chance for the FA, for the Holmesdale side to potentially make it. But I think Tunbridge Wells win this one 2-1. ASC Vardinians versus Tooting and Mitcham United. They are a team which just haven't really had any noticeable history. The main thing that they're probably known for is that their stadium that they currently play in is the Withdean Stadium, which used to host Brighton and Hove Albion at one point when they had that tiny stadium, if you remember. They're up against the Tooting and Mitcham side that is combated for the playoffs last season. They've won the Isthmian League twice. They've been in quarterfinals of the FA Trophy in 1975-76, quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2000-2001, and have been in the first round of the FA Cup a total of, as a max finish, a total of 6 times, second round 2 times, third round 1 time, and they've even reached the fourth round in 1975-76. Reaching the fourth round is the last 32 for a non-league team is absolutely mental. They beat Romford 1-0 in the first round, popular, then Leatherhead 2-1 after a replay in the second. But in the third round, they triumphed over Football League opposition, defeating Swindon Town of the third division. after a 2-2 draw at Swindon. They then won home 2-1, and then made a long journey to Bradford City. But they unfortunately lost 3-1. But put up a good fight. And actually, I think a team with a huge amount, if there was one team which is a non-league history sort of one for the books, it's Tooting and Mitcham United, on a sort of similar level to your sort of Herefords and Blyth Spartans, so to speak. So yeah, I think from that heritage alone, 3-1 for Tooting and Mitcham. Abbey Rangers versus Corinthian Casuals. I'm pinpointing this one out because I actually think that Abbey Rangers may be quite a solid scoreline for this one. The team at Corinthians Casuals, which have reached the first round of the FA Cup in the 1965-66 and 1983-84, reached the finals of the FA Amateur Cup in 1955-56, reached the fifth round of the FA Vase in 1983-84, were recently in the Isthmian League, and so yeah, I think they're in the Premier Division, that is, of the Isthmian League. I think we may have a shock and Abbey Rangers win this one 4-2. AFC Whiteleaf versus Chipstead. Well, Whiteleaf was a team which was in the Isthmian League. They've been around for years, and then they folded a few seasons back. But they were phenomenal last season and got promoted accordingly back to the Isthmian League and winning the league. And no one was particularly surprised, so to speak. They were runners-up of the FA Vase actually last season as well, and have really been great since coming back, as you would well and truly expect. They're up against Chipstead, who were 17th last season. So I'm going to say we're going to see an absolute drumming here. 7-0 win for AFC Whiteleaf. So yeah. East Grinstead Town versus Eastbourne United. You've got East Grinstead is a team which were in the Isthmian League relatively recently. Actually, still are rather, and have been for a long time, but very much lower end of it, and I don't think haven't done as nearly as good as they should have done in the FA Cup, with the match they're reaching as a second qualifying round. They're hosting Eastbourne United, but are a team which were in the playoffs last season of the Southern Combination. They are a team that really have just been basically at that level their entire history. They've reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup twice, and the semi-final of the FA Vase in 2013-14. But have never been a decent team, really. So I think a 2-2 draw and East Grinstead to win the replay. But we could see an upset there. Haywards Heath Town versus Ashford United. Haywards Heath were in the playoffs, which they lost to Eastbourne United last season of the Southern Combination. They've also reached the third qualifying round in 1945-46 of the FA Cup, that is. Have been in the Isthmian League at one point, but were relegated in 2022-23. But they're up against a team which is regularly in the Isthmian League in Ashford United, who were in mid-table in the Isthmian League last season, and have been really that sort of level ever since the 1950s, to be honest, apart from a brief 5-year spell in between 1999 and 2004. Oh no, even then they were in something easier. No, I think ever since 1959 they've been decent. They were in apart from, but then they folded and reformed, didn't they? And then since then have come back to the point that they expected to be at. So they're a team which definitely have a history. In fact, they were in the FA Cup first round several times before, playing against the likes of Palace, Fulham, Brentford in the first round. And they've reached the second round 3 times in 1960-61, 1966-67, and 1996-97. They've been in a semi-final of the FA Trophy, 1972-73, and in quarter-final of the FA Vase in 2015-16. They're certainly one which you would expect to win this one, and I'm going to say so. 2-0 Ashford United. Edgware and Kingsbury versus British Airways. Edgware and Kingsbury were quite poor last season, finished 16th in the combined counties Premier Division North. And they're a side which have been in the Isthmian League before and reached the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup in 1978-79, fifth round of the FA Vase in 1991-92. They're a team that many would probably wipe out and say that they're not going to win this one. The reason I think they will is because they're up against a British Airways team which were actually worse than them last season, and have basically never been a good team. They only entered the FA Cup for the first time last season after they were promoted via the playoffs from the Combined Counties League Division 1. 2-0 to Edgware and Kingsbury. I think it's one of them ones that British Airways have just yet to prove to me that they are good at the FA Cup. Lingfield versus Whitstable Town we'll go with next. Lingfield, I think, have had some decent performances, but have never really managed to get onto that next level. You know, they've really been in the Southern Combination their entire time, and have sort of been floating around mid-table. So yeah, I think it's one of them ones that you don't expect much from Lingfield coming into this, but they're up against a Whitstable Town team that's a horrible addition of a horrible new logo. What the old one? Nice. Who won the FA Vase last season, so instantly make them expected to win it. They've been in the third qualifying round of the FA Cup before 3 different times, been in the Isthmian League a lot. There's certainly a team on paper that you'll be expecting full well to win this game, and I think Lingfield are actually going to provide an upset to win 2-1 here, knocking out the holders of the FA Vase. Kennington versus Saltower Hamlets. Kennington are a team that are from Ashford, and they've always just been a team in the Southern Counties East League for as long as I remember, to be honest. They're never good in the FA Cup, and so if they manage to win right in this one, I think it may even be their best FA Cup season. Like, they've actually not been that great historically, and I think Saltower Hamlets, despite being promoted last season via the playoffs, are a better team historically, having reached the first qualifying round of the FA Cup, which, okay, admittedly isn't that great, but also reached the fifth round of the FA Vase in 2011-12, and just more established at this level. But I think Kennington will win this one. 3-1 to Kennington. Hythe Town versus Littlehampton Town. You should know someone from Littlehampton. Hythe Town is a team that was relegated from the Isthmian League last season. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup in 2010-11. They lost 5-1 to Hereford United. But that was a very decent season for them. And they've also been in the fourth round of the FA Trophy a couple of seasons back in 2023-24. They were in the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 1989-90. So yeah, certainly a big team on paper historically, Hythe Town. So you would well and truly expect them to win against Littlehampton Town. However, Littlehampton Town got were in the Isthmian League South Central this season. They were in the South East last season, and had a switch and actually were better than Hive last season, despite maybe not having as much historical thing. I mean, they have also reached the first round of the FA. Actually, no, that's a lie. They've reached the first round of the FA Cup in 1991. They were runners-up of the FA Vase in 2021-22. So I think roughly similar standard of squad here, I think, of history of it. 2-2 draw here, and Littlehampton Town to win a replay. Hawley Town versus Corinthian. Hawley Town were relegated last season. No, they weren't. What am I talking about? They've just been a bang average team, really, and haven't done anything with their existence, to be honest. I don't think Hawley are a well-known team. Who was the one which maybe I made a mistake there. A very similar team in terms of Corinthian, actually. But Corinthian has reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2019-20. And actually, I think the reason I picked out this one is because I think it's going to be a fantastic scoreline. 5-4 to Corinthian. Lancing versus Crawley Down Gatwick. Lancing is a team which were relegated from Miss League last season, but that's not really a surprise, considering they were promoted in 2021 based on their COVID performances. And I think they did an admirable job considering the size of the club to actually compete so much, because the match they've reached in the FA Cup is a 4 qualifying round in 1952-53, and they've reached the 4th round of the FA Vase in 2010-11, 2020-21, but not a great team, like history overall. They're up against Crawley Down Gatwick, which have never been a great team. They've reached the 4th round of the FA Vase last season, mind you, but they've always been in this level. I picked this one out is also because of the scoreline. I think Lancing will win this one 4-0. Cow Sports versus Laverstock and Ford. Now, we all know Cow Sports has been a team that were at one point involved in the Southern League a long time ago. Many times been involved in the FA Cup, reached the 4th qualifying round a couple of times, reached 5th round of the FA Vase as well. But they're a team from the Isle of Wight, in a sense. So, and they also have the fastest ever goal as a record in their team, with its 2.5 seconds, a goal scored by Mark Burrows. A likelihood that goal is never, that record is never going to be beaten. And they're up against the Laverstock and Ford team, which have basically been a Wessex League their entire existence. So yeah, I think it's one of them ones that they're probably about equal on paper, but I think 4-0 to Cow Sports. Downton versus Fareham Town. So this one's going to be another shock one, I think. Downton finished in 18th last season, so only just stayed up in the Wessex League as it was. They've never been great in the FA Cup, or really in the FA Vase, reaching the 3rd round, including last season. And Fareham were unbelievable last season when they got promoted via the playoffs to the Isthmian League. So you'd fully expect me to say, oh yeah, Isthmian League. And they've also been in the 1st round of the FA Cup on 4 different occasions during the 80s. They've been in the semi-final of the FA Trophy also in the 80s. Last season, which was 4th round of the FA Vase. All signs should be pointing to me saying that Fareham Town will win this one. I'm going to say Downton to win this one 2-0, which would definitely be an upset. Bradford Town versus Bournemouth. A team which is in Bradford and Avon, caught you all out, and a team which is not the Premier League team, Bournemouth, obviously. So it's quite interesting. Bradford Town were only promoted last season back to the Western League Premier Division, and have reached the 5th round of the FA Vase 3 times. The max they reached in the FA Cup is the 2nd qualifying round. They have to try and overcome Bournemouth, who, I'm going to be honest, their best things being quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2012 haven't really done much within their history. So much so that they've just considered themselves to be second fiddle to the other Bournemouth team, even though they were the original team. I think this will be a 1-1 draw here, and I think Bournemouth will win the replay. Hythe and Dibden versus Portland United. Hythe and Dibden were a team that been in Wessex League for an absolute age. Well, not an age, but they were promoted to Wessex League Premier Division because of COVID results, and haven't really, I don't think, done that well in the FA Cup, really. So they're up against Portland United from the Isle of Portland, obviously, who have been in the fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup on 5 different occasions, have been quite high in the Western League before. But again, as a side which I don't think has ever really had that much success, it's a very hard one to tell because I think both of these are about equally as rubbish. So a 2-2 draw with Portland United winning replay. Christchurch versus Bemerton Heath Harlequins. Christchurch are a team that I think should be doing better than the 9th tier. They've only ever reached the third qualifying round of the FA Cup once in 2020-21. They've reached the 5th round of the FA Vase in 2009. But I think they're just a team which perennially underachieves considering the size of the place they went to. Also, they made the worst career choice worst badge change of all time. Talking about bad badges, you got Bemerton Heath Harlequins, who also made an incredibly bad choice in deciding to resign themselves from the Southern League last season, despite finishing 7th. Absolutely maddening when a team does that. They reached the 5th round of the FA Vase twice. But yeah, I think overall these two teams, you'd think, be roughly the same quality, but I'm going to go Bemerton Heath Harlequins to win this one 4-0. Baffins Milton Rovers versus Shaftesbury. Baffins Milton Rovers are a team which, they've been in the Hampshire League quite recently, actually, within the last 10 years. They were only promoted to Division 1 of Wessex League for the 2016-17 season, and they only got promoted to the Premier Division in 2023-24. Yet they finished 6th last season, and they're a team on the up, in my opinion. Could they have their best FA Cup run to date this season? Maybe. They reached the 4th round of the FA Vase in 2018-19 and last season, equaled their best run to get to the first qualifying round. See if they can go a step beyond. I'm sure that's a great aspiration, but they have a difficult task to begin with up against Shaftesbury of the Southern League, who have, admittedly, I don't think done that great in terms of cup competitions in the past. And they only recently got promoted from Wessex Premier Division in 2023-24. I think Shaftesbury do win this one, actually. 3-2. I think it'll be a close game. Maybe a last-minute winner. Fatcham Town versus Petersfield Town. Fatcham have been blimmin' poor recently, falling through the league, so to speak. They've gone into the Combined Counties League Premier Division South, having been a side which were in the Southern League for the past 6 or 7 seasons now. They've actually had international players playing for them. In Gavin James, who was a Vicentian international, as well as Laurie Sanchez, who was a international footballer with Northern Ireland, and also managed Northern Ireland at one point, which is probably what he's more well known for, and his time playing with Reading and Wimbledon. So yeah, they won the FA Vase in 2017-18, and sort of since that promotion that they got to and in 2017-18, I think they were great in that 2019-20 season when they, if it wasn't for COVID, would have gotten promoted, and then they completely capitulated, and they're now tumbling down the leagues. However, they are up against a Petersfield Town side that I don't think has really had much success, really much at all, really, in cup competitions. So I am going to back Fatcham to win this one 5-0. Moneyfields versus Brockenhurst. Money fields have been for a long time in the Isthmian League. In fact, they were almost in the playoffs of the Isthmian League last season. And they're returned to a redeveloped ground now. And it was interesting because they were in the Isthmian League for a while. Or the Southern League, rather. Then they decided during COVID to relegate themselves voluntarily back to the Wessex League, and actually have done an all right job since then of regaining stature. They're up against a Brockenhurst side that is poor. They've reached the third qualifying round a few times and a couple of times in the fifth round as well of the FA Vars. But they were 16th last season in the Wessex League, which I just don't think is good enough. 2-1 to Moorfields. Falmouth Town versus Helston Athletic. Well, Falmouth sort of replaced to an extent, didn't they? No, it was they did have an overlapping season rather, but they got promoted to the Southern League for the first time in their history in 2023-24. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup on 3 separate occasions, all during the 1960s, been in the quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 1986-87 and 2023-24. They are a team that is certainly back on the up again, I think it's fair to say, since their previous peak in the 1960s. And they've sort of overtaken Helston Athletic as a moving upward sort of team within that sort of Cornish region. Because in the Southern League last season, Helston got relegated back to the Western League, and they're just not as good, I don't think, overall. I mean, they have been improving recently, but they were only promoted to the Western League Premier Division due to the COVID results in 2021. So maybe they're going to go slump back. So I think, Falmouth to win this one 1-0. Tavistock versus AFC St. Austell. Tavistock is, they're in the Southern League, so you'd expect them to win this one. I think for a Southern League team, they haven't done as well in the FA Cup as maybe some people might expect, only reaching the third qualifying round. But then again, they're a team that haven't actually been, they went up through the leagues fairly rapidly, so to speak. They were only promoted to the Southern League in 2021-22, winning the Western League. So they've got to deal with coming up against AFC St. Austell, which is a team which you're sort of mainstay of the Western League, aren't they? Well, actually, yeah. I mean, they're a team that I don't think have ever done well at the FA Cup either. So, which dates back to 1947-48 is their best time when they went to the third qualifying round. They have been in the semi-finals of the FA Vars in 2014-15. I just have a feeling St. Austell might win this one. A bit of a shock upset. 3-1 St. Austell. A bit of a Cornish derby, Saltash United versus Torpoint Athletic, who both have been teams that have had different trajectories in recent years. Saltash United been in fourth qualifying round of the FA Cup before, third round of the FA Vars a few times, but ultimately, the most recent success was the runners-up in the Western League in 2022-23. And last season, I think, were quite poor, actually. Whereas you're looking at, on the other side, you're looking at Torpoint Athletic, who reached quarterfinals of the FA Vars in 2010-11, finished 15th. They were 1 point different last season. I think they're relatively similar, these two teams, in stature. I'm going to go 2-0 Saltash United. I'm going to go home advantage. Street versus Brixham. Street is a team which have been in the first round of the FA Cup in 1938-39, where they were drawn away to Ipswich. But even though a gallant fight, they did lose 7-0 in that time. But that was a long time ago. They reached the 5th round of the FA Vase in 2006-07. Did at one point get promoted to the Southern League, but then decided to get a voluntary demotion back to the Western League after finishing a respectable 8th in 2018-19. And that sort of led to a bit of a mediocre performances of late, whereas Brixham, established in 2012, and talking about good logos, Brixham, 10 out of 10, great logo, got promoted from the Western League last season, had their best performance in the FA Cup last season, reaching the first round, reached the 5th round of the FA Vase in 2022-23, have been a team on fundamentally just on an upward trajectory, really, over recent years. And you got to back Brixham for this one, 2-0. St. Blasey versus Buckland Athletic. St. Blasey are a team which we admired in a relegation battle from a Western League last season. The team which used to have the likes of Derek Bellotti, Steve Davey, Nigel Martin, Sean Taylor, Percy Varco. If you sort of know some of them players, I don't know if you necessarily will. You might not. But they are a team which have reached the 4th round qualifying of the FA Cup in 1998-99, 5th round of the FA Vase in 2002-03, but have never really been a standout performer, actually, at any sort of level. Whereas Buckland Athletic are a team that were involved within challenging for the playoffs in the Western League last season, have reached the quarterfinals for the FA Vase in 2016-17. They've been runners-up historically in Western League and certainly knocking on the doors of the Southern League for a long time, I think. But I'm going to back St. Blasey to win this one 1-0. Bideford versus Wellington. We'll go with that one because Bideford are in the league above, finishing mid-table, reaching the first round of the FA Cup in 4 different occasions in 1964-65, 1973-74, 77-78, and 81-82. Have reached the semi-finals of the FA Vase in 2003-04. They've been a side which have been in the Southern League for a while now, since getting promoted from Western League in 2009-10. So yeah, they've been in the Southern League for 15 seasons now. They're actually in the Premier Division of the Southern League between 2012-13 and 2015-16, finishing at the highest of 8th. And they're hosting a Wellington team that were mid-table in Western League last season. They've never passed the first qualifying round of the FA Cup. Best round of the FA Vase is the 4th round in 2021-22. They've just not been... They're not a great team, really. And so I'm actually going for a bold prediction and saying there's going to be a 1-1 draw here. And I do think a bit of a will and replay, but that's an early shot, maybe. Willand Rovers versus Barnstaple Town. Willand Rovers also in the Southern League. They finished mid-table in the Division 1 South last season. They reached the quarterfinals of the FA Vase in 2018-19. They've been someone who have been a semi-regular fixture for the last 5 seasons or so in the Southern League. They are up against Barnstaple Town, who finished in the playoffs last season of the Western League, only to lose out to Brixham in the playoff semi-finals. They've been in the first round of the FA Cup 4 different times in 1951-52, 54-55, 59-60, and 72-73. And 4th round of the FA Vase in 1994-95. But yeah, they're definitely a team which have historically had huge sorts of successes in the FA Cup, playing against the likes of Bournemouth in there and Exeter as well. But yeah, very, very interesting. I think it's going to be another 1-1 draw here, and I think Welling Rovers will win the replay. Mosul versus Bridgewater United. I'm pointing this one out because even though Mosul are expected to potentially win this one, being in the league above, finishing just outside the playoffs in 6th, definitely a team we should expect to win this one against a Bridgewater side which finished 17th last season in a relegation battle. Although Bridgewater have reached the second round of the FA Cup twice in 1960-61 and 62-63, and 3 times for the 5th round of the FA Vase, including recently in 2023-24. I think it's going to be a dominant display by Mosul, a 5-1 win. We'll make this the final one, Hallam versus Lower Breck, because it's getting late. And Hallam got promoted last season from the Northern Counties League, whereas Lower Breck got promoted from the Northwest Counties League. So, to be honest, both these teams are very even on paper. Both are going to run just different Northern Premier League teams at Tier 8. But I'm going to go with, well, they seem to draw each other every single season in terms of the FA Cup. I go 2-1 to Hallam. Thank you very much for watching. It's a lot of it's a 2.5 hour. I think it's the longest prediction video I've ever made, and that's why I said I can't go through every single club. Who are the Rams signed this summer, still celebrating a semi-final win before a kick of the ball is played at Wembley? Well, we've signed some decent players. Colton Morris. We've signed a fair few good ones. Aguiman. We've recently made Ryan Brewster today. I'll talk fully about Derby County when it comes to the club in the championship predictions. But yeah, Derby beaten Leeds. What a day that was. What a day. I remember that very well. I was in the pub watching it. Absolute greatness, absolute scenes. You don't sound very Derbyshire way. Okay, great. He's a bit of a troll, I think, this Muckenhoff. Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. Okay, this guy's clearly from Leeds. Clearly got a vendetta against Derby. I'm just reading through your comments, mate, because that's what I do. Yeah. So I'm glad we can have a bit of banter. You know, I'm happy with the banter, and I hope you're doing well, Muckenhoff. But yeah, I've got a fair bit of non-league knowledge. A bit too much, to be honest. But thank you very much for watching. Please let you know any predictions that you have for the FA Cup this season. Who do you think is going to win it? Who do you think is going to do well in non-league? But I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.